Hey folks, greetings from the Offensive Security Group here at Security IT 360, coming at you with a new episode of the Cyber Threat Perspective. You've got today with me Darrius and Tyler, who are two pen testers on the OffSec team here at Security IT 360, and we have another first on our channel video of content, I guess. We're going to be doing a tier list, and not just any tier list. We're going to be doing a tier list of pen testing certifications. So super awesome. I'm excited to have you guys on the podcast to do this. We did another certification podcast episode just recently, a few months ago, where we talked about different certifications and the values and what our thoughts were. And we thought that we would do another one where we get even more offensive, I guess, and rank them and talk about them and maybe get a little bit opinionated on some of them and the value of some of them. Hopefully we get some good conversation out of this. But that's kind of where we started with this discussion is we wanted to talk again about more cybersecurity pen testing certifications specifically. And we thought what better way to do that than to rank them with a tier list.
This is one that I've been looking forward to for a long time because Spencer, we've had conversations about different certs and, whether they're important or not for a while. So yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah. And, anytime you bring up certifications, I think it's always a heated debate. It's kind of like OST tools or OST and which is offensive security tools. You talk about threat intelligence now recently in the news. There's very opinionated takes on it. So I think this will be a fun, interesting conversation. Darius, I don't know if you want to share a little bit more about kind of why else we want to do this. You want to talk about, our relationship with the certs and kind of how we see these, but any introductory thoughts?
So it's kind of like similar to our last time we talked about certifications. They're definitely not the end all be all, right? But at the same time, they're kind of needed. And, you kind of have to find that balance between pursuing certs, but at the same time, making sure that you gather real world experience to kind of supplement that, because ultimately that's what gets you the job, right? So, certifications get you the recognition, it gets you past HR, but, there are plenty of people that have every single certification that you can imagine, but they can't, if you sit them in front of a box, right, they're not going to really be able to work through it. And so I think it's really important that everybody, strike that balance within yourself. And that can be hard to do sometimes.
And to your point, Darius, there's tons of people who don't have any certifications, right? Or even college degrees that are tremendous, exceptional hackers, right?
Yeah.
And we hear about that all the time. So yeah, take all that with a grain of salt and everything that we say with a grain of salt. We're just one person, one opinion. So definitely do your own research and make your own opinions. Tyler, before we get started, any opening thoughts about the bloodbath that's about to happen?
No, I'm just excited to get into it.
Cool. So I'm going to bring up, for those listening in, we'll do a good job here of kind of articulating what we're looking at. But if you do want to watch, I'm going to be sharing a tier list on the screen. And so if you're listening on a podcast, hop over to YouTube and check out the video where you can see where we're ranking everything. So I'm going to bring this in. So here's our tier list. So if you're not familiar with a tier list, this has its roots in video games, in fighting games. And essentially it's a way of ranking things. So we have a number of different tiers. So the S tier is the top tier. That's like, it used to be called God tier in like fighting game world. But S tier is like the premium. That's the best of the best, right? A tier is a little bit under that. Like it's really good, but not as good as S. B is mid tier, right? It's middle of the road. It's kind of average. C, below average, not super ideal. And then D, and sometimes you'll see F on tier lists as well. Those are like the worst of the worst. Don't even bother. Don't waste your time kind of things. So that's how the tier list is structured. So we're going to go through each one of these, talk about them, and kind of rank them together on this tier list. Now, before we get started, criteria, right? We were talking before the show started. What are we going to be ranking them on? So A couple of the things we're going to be talking about and ranking them on is the experience and knowledge gained from the certification, right? I think that's an important criteria. The job marketability and clout is another thing that's really important. How likely are you to get a job after getting that certification, and how recognized would you be after obtaining that? Darrius, what are some other ones that we're going to be, ranking these on?
Yeah, so one that I like to look at is the testing format, right? So is it just a multiple choice test versus is there a practical component? Because I do think that's important. Additionally, we know with the knowledge, once again, this kind of ties into the knowledge gained, is it the knowledge that you gain, are you actually going to be able to use it in the real world? Or is it more of like a, hey, you added a new thing to add next time you do a CTF, but that's as far as it's going to go. And then lastly, and this is one I think you added that I really like, is okay, so you get the certification. What does the community look like, after the fact and surrounding that certification?
Yeah, and that's a big component that I think is important to consider. Is there's a lot of people that are really emphatic about certain certifications. Like I'm taking right now the CRTO exam and certification, and there's a really big community that Rostamaus has created with that, and it's awesome, and people helping each other. So that's an important consideration for choosing a certification to get. All right, so that's our criteria. That's kind of how we're going to rank them. Let's just dive in.
Awesome.
Burp Suite Certified Practitioner. So Darrius, I'll let you go first with your comments on this first, and then Tyler and I can kind of jump in.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, this just completely falls into the category of web application pen testing, right? So if you're doing a web app pen test, you are more than likely going to be using Burp Suite. And this certification kind of ensures that not only are you able to exploit, common web app vulnerabilities, but, do you know Burp Suite, the tool, well enough? Because most people, when they use Burp Suite, they think of the proxy, they think of repeater, intruder, but there's really some really cool like things that you can do with Burp Suite if you dive like super deep into it. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so what are your thoughts then on how well this prepares somebody to use Burp in like a web app engagement?
Yeah, so I would say this one prepares you fairly well. And I'm going to add to our criteria because I just thought about it. Cost.
Oh yeah, cost.
Yeah, like that's
How can we forget? Cost is no option.
Right, yeah. So, man, like for me personally, I think the Burp Suite Certified Practitioner exam is great. It's practical. It is like, hey, can you exploit the web app? Yes or no, point blank. That's it. There is no, well, if you get X amount of multiple choice and then maybe you get one practical right, you pass. No, it's not like
Yep.
that at all, which personally I really like. And it covers a lot of topics that I use on engagements. Like there's a lot of times where if I want to get better at something, I go to the Burp Suite Academy and I like there's a lab for it. And there have been times where I've gone through a lab, and then because of that, I've been able to actively exploit something in an engagement. So
Yep.
I'm a huge fan. Personally, I put it in A tier. It's $99 to take the exam, so it's really cheap. And then what you get from it is just amazing. I will say though, it doesn't have the name recognition of like other certs, and that's why I wouldn't put it in S tier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say another thing that makes that one pretty high is that all the training for that certification is free. Like all the training for that certification is open to everybody, so anybody can take it. But, the cost of the exam is about the only thing that you pay.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. And, being that most pen testers are going to use Burp or they're going to use Zap or something similar, I would suspect some of the content has overlaps with a methodology for testing with those tools. So yeah, I'm cool putting in A tier. I think it's really good for the dollars that you get. Yeah, I think the only thing that would make it better is, like you said, Darrius, a little bit more industry recognition or a little bit more awareness on job requirements and things like that of people looking for it in idealizing it.
Exactly.
All right, so the next one, it's showing up here twice, but just ignore that. It's just one. This is the CRTP, which is Altered Securities Azure Pentesting Certification. Now, this one is an interesting certification. It's a 48-hour exam, I believe, but it's all Azure based. So Azure Pentesting, right? So Azure, Microsoft 365, Azure AD. It is a fairly comprehensive Azure Pentesting certification. I don't think there's a whole lot of Azure focused pentesting certs. Obviously, there's Active Directory ones with like CRTO and the CRTP, which is Altered Security's Red Team cert, which is Active Directory focused. But all in all, I think it's a very comprehensive cert. It's definitely very affordable when you compare it to something like a SANS cert. It's more comparable to like the CRTO price. So definitely good there. The only downside, and this is a theme with me, is the 48-hour exam. For me personally, I don't necessarily like those all-out blitz, rush and do it within 24 48-hour type exams where you are where you have to sacrifice sleep and eat and healthy habits and stuff like that. That's my main complaint with this. Otherwise, I think it's probably a phenomenal cert. It's good value for the money. Maybe lacks a little bit on industry recognition, but those are some of my initial thoughts on the CARTP. I don't know if anybody else has something to chime in there.
Yeah, so there, to your point, just because you mentioned it, there aren't really a lot of cloud pen testing certs. They're coming. I think the industry as a whole is still trying to define, okay, what what is cloud pen testing, right? We've had this talk before. And so, the fact that they have something that's out there, it's practical, and you can, feasibly, use it in the real world, puts it up really high. But to your point, yeah, the 48-hour format, that's a lot for something that doesn't have the name recognition, right? Like with the OSCP, which we're going to get into.
Yeah,
that's just my thoughts on it.
Yeah, and so because of that, because of like the exam format, for me personally, I put it in B tier. I think they could do it better by stretching the exam out and making it a little bit more realistic to a typical engagement. I think a pen testing certification should be representative of a somewhat typical engagement. That's just me personally. I don't necessarily like CTF based exams where you're just hunting a flag and that kind of thing. But so that's where I would put it. I'd put it B tier.
Tyler?
Yeah, I mean, I think the training that you can get from this is really comprehensive, and like the total education value from it would be, I'd place it B tier as well, just from that alone, because, it does go over all your basics like priv-esc, lateral movement, persistence, initial access, enumeration, and even defenses are all encompassed in the training and, the credential of that certification. So I feel like it does have a lot of value in that.
Yep. Yeah, and in the trainer, the guy who runs Altered Security and created those has a long history with AD and Active Directory security, and I definitely believe there's really good value there. So moving along, this is one of our favorites, CEH.
This is easy.
So anybody want to jump in? Is there anything to say?
Let's just go ahead and put it in D tier. We can just yeah. So for those, I guess who don't know, before we just put it in that tier, CEH, it used to be the cert, like years ago. And I guess if you're working on government, within the government, it's still really helpful in that capacity. But in my opinion, it's outdated, and that shows within its format. So, there's no practical portion. It's all multiple choice, which to me, if I'm looking to hire someone that's supposed to be a pen tester, I want to see that you can actually do it, and just answering multiple choice questions doesn't really show that, in my opinion. It shows you can learn vocabulary. And so just as a result, its reputation has kind of dropped off a lot, especially as other certifications have like risen up. And so, and until they change things, I think it belongs in the D tier.
Yeah, I think it's very recognizable as a certification, but I feel like it's also very expensive to obtain. I know that Jordan from our team took that certification, and the training alone, was over $1,000 for the book and the exam. And, for an exam that isn't going to prepare you well for the industry. Spending that much money, investing that much time doesn't seem to give you very much value for your dollar.
Yeah. Yeah, and the CEH has always been the one that's been memed on in the community, right? Because of all the things you guys have said. I think they have like a V2 that has some practical components in it. And to your point, Darrius, it does fulfill that DoD, I forget what it is. There's some DoD requirement, right, for certification. So CH does fulfill that. So I think, like you said, until there's some pressure put on those organizations to update their requirements for those things, and not much will change with that. But we'll continue to meme on CH and poke fun at it. If you are a serious pen tester or you're looking to get a job, CH is not necessarily going to help you, and if it does, you're probably looking at the wrong organizations,
or you're in the government,
or you're in the government, right? If somebody's like, "Oh, you got a CH? That's awesome," no, just turn around and walk away. So CPTS, this is a new one, and I'm excited to talk about it because this is a new one that I think looks very promising. There's two new certifications that have hit the market recently. One is a PNPT, which I'm a big fan of, as everybody knows, and the CPTS also looks very promising. The reason I say that is because of the exam format. So it's a 5-day exam, and then you get another several days to write a report. It's supposed to be a very practical pen test driven type of certification, which is awesome. And it's pretty affordable. And the downside, right, is it's a new certification. There's really not many people that have taken it yet. It doesn't have the industry recognition. But I'm a big fan of this. They have a good training module, a training academy that you go through to work on this. So I'm a big fan of this. I'm looking forward to looking at it. But those are some of my thoughts on the CPTS.
Yeah, and if you're a student, for the training plus an exam voucher, you're paying $8 a month for the training and then $210 for an attempt at the exam, which seems very reasonable for the certification. Because if you look at your other certifications, you're spending $300-400 for a voucher. So cut that price in half and make the training super cheap. I'd say that's a lot of value.
I think so. I think I would rather have a cheaper or a less expensive certification that does some, even if it's an introductory level but practical type of examination and course. I think that is way more valuable than a more expensive course that has a lot to it but not as much practical application. So I'm a big fan. I think this is B tier. For sure. It's definitely not A. If it gets recognition and we continue to see good things about it, I think it can move up to an A. And we'll see where it goes from there. But I think it's a B. I don't know if I'd put it ahead of the CARTP just because it's newer. So I'm going to put it behind, and we'll put it there.
Yep.
Thoughts?
No, I mean, I think B is the perfect tier for it. I will say I do like, because this is new to me, I do like how it's structured, where part of it is it seems like you actually have to complete the modules before you can even sit for the exam, which I think it's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's good. I think the modules look awesome. I think it is going to be a good stepping stone for people getting into pen testing for sure.
And it also looks like it covers external, internal, and web app pen testing all in one cert. So I think it really has potential.
Cool. So CRT, this is the CREST registered tester, registered pen tester cert. You do need to have the CPSA, I think it's called, first before you attempt this. This is more of a UK thing and not a US type cert, although you can get it in US. It seems to me like this is kind of similar to like a Pen Test Plus with some application based or practical portions of this. So it's maybe like, to me, a Pen Test Plus like some practical type stuff. I think it's fairly affordable, but not widely recognized in US, I don't think. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, I think that's my first time seeing it.
Yeah, considering just now hearing about it, And I'm sure there's some good stuff in there. I'm looking through it now, but just like based off what I'm seeing, I feel like this is, um, due to his lack of reputation, it doesn't seem too crazy at the moment. I'm thinking C or D personally.
Yeah, I think so too. I think I would put it in C, because I don't see it being memed on or anything like that, and I want to reserve the D tier for for stuff that gets memed on. So I think it could arguably be a B tier cert as well. But like you said, there's not a lot known about it. I think there's a handful of people I've seen that have it, but haven't heard a lot about it. I think there are other better options. Um, so yeah. All right.
Sweet.
So CRTP. So this is again from Altered Security. This is a certified red team professional. This is very heavy on Active Directory, internal pen testing type certification, assume breach type of deal, where you're going to be enumerating Active Directory and looking at SQL Server, Microsoft SQL Server, and doing Kerberos attacks and domain Prevesc and all sorts of fun stuff like that. That's like my wheelhouse. I love that stuff. I haven't attempted this yet, primarily due to the exam format, which again is a 24-hour format, similar to OSCP. Same kind of thoughts on that. But as far as the content goes, I think the content is really good, very comprehensive, and a good starting point for somebody learning internal pen testing or even leveling up their skills as an internal pen tester. I think is a really great option if you don't mind the grueling 24-hour exam format type deal.
Yeah, so looks like the pricing for that isn't bad either. It looks like it's what, like $300.
Yeah, and there used to be specials on it. There's boot camps that you can get discounted pricing on it, which is really cool. The lab looks really interesting too. So that's one of the things about internal pen tests is if you don't have your own lab, you have to buy one or find one or play Hack the Box or the pro labs. It's hard to get like a decent enterprise grade lab. So just to have a playground to try some of these internal pen test type of attacks is really awesome. So that is really good. And overall, I think it's a great cert. I would put it in B, probably right next to the other Altered Security cert. With just the one downside to me is the exam format.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. That's fun.
So we're cruising along. We're getting into the ELearning Security certifications now, which just as I say that, I believe they're sunsetting some of these. Or
They are, yeah. The ECPTX is sadly being sunset. I will say I am going to be extremely biased for these guys, just because I somewhat have a good relationship with e-learning and all of them, and I think these are great certs. But I'll try to stay as unbiased as possible.
Yeah, so the ECPPT V2, Darrius, thoughts? Like what high level, what are you thinking?
So I honestly think the ECPPT is a great cert. I think it's a great intermediary cert. And I say that only because one, it's realistic. It's hey, you have, it's not like a 48-hour exam. It's not CTF like. It's not, the point of the exam is necessarily, hey, get these flags. It's, hey, you're writing an assessment. You're going to basically assess the environment, find the vulnerabilities, write them up, exploit them, write them up. You're going to have to actually document how you did it. And I think that's huge, because in a real engagement, that's what you're going to be doing. You don't just find the flag and then pack up and say, well, all right, client, I'm done. It doesn't work that way. And so I do think the format of the exam is realistic. I think some of the topics are great, but some of it's like a little bit, outdated a little bit. By that, I mean, I don't know about you, Spencer. I've never been on an engagement where I've been like, ooh, buffer overflow. I think that's a little bit outdated now.
Yeah.
But I think it has a little bit. I think it's rising the ranks a little bit in terms of name recognition. So I'm thinking B.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that when I think about the ELearning security stuff, I do think of them being a little bit more pricey than some of the others other competing certs. But that being said, I think there is good value there. I think it does teach good fundamentals for the most part. I would be fine putting it in B tier. I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily put it ahead of CPTS or after, but
what? It has way more name recognition. I would say it has more name recognition than the CPTS.
all right, we'll put it there. We'll put it there. No, I agree. CPTS is still very new. It's still very new. But ECPTX. So
do we want to do this one
sunsetting.
since it's it's kind of, I will say it's a tough exam. It's not easy.
Yep.
But so I mean,
so since they're sunsetting it,
yeah,
we're just gonna put it right there.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's fair.
I mean, there's no point in taking a certification that's going away.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Agreed. The EJPT, and I feel very strongly about this one. I personally think it is the entry level, in my opinion, it's the premier entry level. Like, I know nothing about pen testing. I know, like, I'm still, I know very little, but I'm trying to get into it. I think it's the way to go. I think the exam is very fair. All the other points I brought in terms of the ECPPT still kind of exist. I think it's a great entry level cert.
So would you call it A tier?
You know what? Actually, I would argue I would put it as A tier. I do think it's fair to say it's A tier from a strictly, like, if I'm a junior pen tester and I have like zero experience, the OSCP, I'm maybe not OSCP level, but I'm trying to work my way up to it. I think the EJPT, that's where it comes in.
And I think so. A lot of the training material too for this is free. Like the introductory academy or whatever they call it. A lot of it is free as well, similar with the Burp Suite content. So I think it makes sense. I think that's fair to put it in A tier, maybe low A tier. But yeah, I think I agree with that.
Yeah, I think I'd put it lower A tier simply. Like, I don't feel like name recognition is behind it. And I also feel like it's not like, you say premier junior cert, and I can agree with that, but I feel like it's also a stepping stone certification. Like, you're going to want to get something on top of that to prove more in-depth knowledge. So, which is where the EWPT and EWPTX come in, right? There's not a lot of web pen testing certs. So what is the lowdown on these?
There's not. And as much as I love ELearning, like, I love their stuff, I sadly have to put this at the C tier. If only because the material that they cover, it's like, it's fine, but it's not, I said it on a previous podcast. There's very few web app pen testing certs that I feel like has that oomph, or at least it's somewhat like realistic. Like, it's going to be the basic, SQL injection on a login page,
Yeah, your OWASP top 10.
Yeah, and it's like, that's not, it's not exactly as realistic as I would like for it to be.
So what's preventing you from putting it in D tier?
Because it's ELearning. I love those guys. So there's no way I could put them in D tier.
So it's a
so the bias is letting you go to C tier.
So it's a solid C, is what you're saying.
I would say it's a solid C. Look, stepping stone cert for sure. If you've never done anything web app related, but like, if you know how to develop, if you've done web app pen testing before, I personally wouldn't look at it.
Yeah, I would say that, and I would venture to guess that a lot of the stuff that would be in ECPPT V2 or CPTS would probably introduce you to maybe just as much as the EWPT, maybe not EWPTX, but it would at least get you introduced to those topics where you could go dive into them yourselves. And then maybe those two other ones wouldn't necessarily be worth it because you'd be moving on to something a little bit more advanced than those would be able to offer. So we're getting into the SAN certs now, which we all know and love for various different reasons, or maybe we hate. I don't know. We'll see. But for the sake of time, we're getting kind of up to our limit of what we'd like one single episode to be. So we'll do a part one. So this is part one that you just saw. And we're going to do a part two where we talk about the rest of these. So we have the SAN certs, we have the offensive security certs, we have the CompTIA certs, and TCM security, and then finally we have the CRTO and CRTO2 certification exams. So we'll talk about those in part 2 of this video. So look for that slash podcast. So that's it for us for today. You can
only thing
Yeah,
I'll
go
say
ahead.
is, I'd love to hear the community's opinions. So feel free to comment. I know we're posting this on multiple platforms. Like, comment. Let us know if you think our takes are bad, if you agree. All of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to hear everybody's hot takes about all of these certification exams for sure. I think that would be fun. But yeah, you can find us on offsec.blog. We post new episodes every Wednesday, so check it out, and we'll see you next time.